Hello, my name is Dan Humberg. I represent harvestfires.com. If you're watching this, you're probably involved in the installation of a Firestop kit on a combine, probably to prevent fires in sunflowers or some other volatile crop. I'm currently sitting in what I'd call the hole, the space between the engine and the grain tank, on a Case IH model 7250 combine. This is a brand new machine. It's never been in the field yet. I'm on a dealer lot and they've allowed me to do this video on this particular machine. What the video is going to show you here is how to install the tin kit around the exhaust manifold, turbocharger, and the first part of the exhaust system after that. Hopefully this will fit well enough that we won't have to make changes to it. If it doesn't fit, I'll be marking it up and trimming it as necessary, and then I'll make those changes to the tin pieces so that any kit that you would get would be should have the bugs worked out of it so that it will fit, I'd never say easily, but fit well on your combine. Before we start, I usually give the little boilerplate talk about the fact that the Firestop kit is very good at preventing the ignition of volatile dusts at the exhaust system, because we really isolate the exhaust system from the dust by pressurizing that area with clean filtered air. But I can't guarantee that you'll never ever have a fire or a smolder on your combine. It's there's just too many possible sources of ignition to say that you could never have a fire with this kit on. You can still have a hot bearing, you can have an electrical short, you can have a friction place that causes enough heat to generate a smolder, alternator that throws sparks or something like that. But aside from those things, this kit is designed to try to prevent the fires that occur at the exhaust system, which is the vast majority of the ignitions that you get on the machine. I'll step through all of the parts of this installation of the tin kit here. I probably won't put in anywhere near all of the screws in the kit because I am on a dealer lot, and the first thing we're going to do when I get this done is to take it all back off. So I only need enough screws together to hold it on. You would want to put all of the screws in that you can possibly reach. There may be a couple on here that are really difficult to reach or get at, and you may choose to not put those screws in as long as the kit will hold together. We can also make judicious use of the aluminum foil tape that I send with the kit to tighten up any little spots where you think there's a gap or a leak or something like that. And I usually put that tape over the surface of the screw heads. I usually cut a strip of it, not the full width of it, but cut a strip of it and put it over the screw heads because it acts kind of like Loctite on those screws. It doesn't let them vibrate loose because it is thin sheet metal we're putting together here. So that's what we're going to do. You might notice that I'm wearing a hat here, wide-brimmed hat. This is not so much a fashion statement, and it is a nice sunny day here, but the reason I wear the hat isn't so much to protect my head, although I am at the age where I can now get a sunburn on the top of my head. Not something I'm very excited about, but that is the case. However, the brim on the hat actually acts as an early warning system. If you're going to bend over to pick up a tool or that you dropped, which is probably going to happen, there's a lot of really hard, pointy surfaces in here, and you can hit your head on them. And so this gives you a little warning that you're getting close to something. So that's actually a lot of the reason I wear the hat. Although today with the sun shining, it actually is kind of nice to be in the shade. Let's see, I got a couple other things I want to point out before I start in with tin. I'm going to grab you and make you mobile here. If we look at the exhaust manifold, I'm going from the left side of the exhaust across the top of the exhaust manifold here, left to right. That would be engine or radiator side to the transmission end of the tractor for the engine. There are two clamps here that join this cast iron piece to the center piece, and there's a matching two set of clamps here that mate the center piece to the outer cast iron piece, and there's an expansion joint bellows like thing in between here. Those clamps are put together with probably stainless steel Allen screws or Allen bolts, And when they do them at the factory, they put them vertically like this because that's the easiest way for them to put them on, and it looks neat and everything. However, when we do this, we need all the space we can get right in here to clear our tin, because we're going to enclose this but not this. So we got to go through there, and those screws get in the way. Now, it's not very difficult to move them. It requires a 5mm Allen wrench, and I've already done these so that I did them ahead of time. I didn't want to take a lot of time on video. But you can loosen up the Allen screw that tightens the clamp. I think these I backed off like 4 or 5 turns, and then you might have to tap it a little bit to break it loose, but you can then rotate it around so that the screw is on the bottom side of the manifold pointed back at the block, maybe even under a little bit so it's pointed up a little bit in the back. And then you can put that wrench back in here and turn it around and pull it back up tight again. I kind of like to count the turns that I made to loosen it, and then go back that many turns plus another quarter or half or something like that to make darn sure that I've got this snug back up to where the factory would want it, and I don't leave it loose in any way. But I've done that over here, and I did it over here even though I'm not certain that it's necessary on this side. But you can see that down there, perhaps, maybe you can see down in there, the heads of the Allen screws where I turned them so they're pointed back at the block, and then threaded them back, tightened them back up. So I did that. There are similar clamps over here on the riser that goes up to the diesel oxidation catalyst, and your exhaust comes through here and comes up through this section. So there's a clamp here, another one up here. On some of the machines I've done, not this 7250, but some of them, the clamp was over here on the side or around in the front or something like that. And to fit inside our tin kit, it's probably best if it's swung around just like they did these, where it's on the back, the grain tank side of the riser. So if you have to, you can loosen them up and swing them around to where they're in the back here. This one is also partially under this little heat shield that they added this year to the kit as well, so that might complicate that a little bit if you have to do that. But anyway, it is possible to loosen them up. Again, there's an Allen, well, these don't have an Allen screw. They actually have what looks like about a 13mm nut on here, and you'd need a deep well 13 socket to fit over that and loosen these up. But it's possible to do that if you need to. Just looking ahead at that. So the next thing we're probably going to do is start with tin, and I'll interrupt my video here and start with that tin, and then kind of bring you along piece by piece. And I'll try and edit this so it doesn't take all day to watch it as well when we get it, so you can view it online. All right, you're now looking at the to my left end of the manifold. This is the radiator end here, and I can wrap my hand almost around underneath it here. I guess I can. And anyway, we're going to enclose that. I've got piece number 1. Your pieces will probably have a number cut through one of the flanges that'll say C75 01 or 1 or something like that. So that's piece number 1. Mine's marked with a Sharpie. Now this piece that we've bent up, the way you probably watched the video already on how to bend the tin on the bench. So if we've done it correctly, this piece will fit around the left end of the manifold. I just did it wrong. This bottom tapered thing is kind of here on the outside, so this long side of this where my fingers are will go up against the block like that, and it'll sit there while we grab piece number 2. Piece number 2, again, mine's marked with a Sharpie. You should have bent it up on the bench to look like this. We'll slip down underneath here, and it will slide inside of or underneath the tabs of piece number 1. I kind of want them overlapping because the blast of air coming from the radiator comes this way, and I want it sliding over those tabs to head that way and not get caught under anything, and I don't want any dust being able to slip under and inside the box. So we're going to slip this around here inside of the other one, and if we've assembled it on the bench the way I recommend you do, the holes should line up. The screw holes should line up. One of the tools that I'll give you with the kit is this little stubby screwdriver, some version of it. Yours might have an aluminum handle or a wooden handle. For some of these screws where it's hard to reach, that might be the best way to do that, is with that one. Otherwise, if you got a longer screwdriver or a little mini screw gun or cordless drill, that'll do it. Put them in, but I'm going to try and get this one in. Looks easy, right? Okay, I clearly did not do what I tell everybody to do in the bench video, and that is to assemble it with all the screws so that you previously run a screw in for every hole so they're threaded. I didn't do that on that one, so it didn't assemble very easily, but I may have to take time here to go off camera and run a bunch of screws in just so that they go in easily on the video. They bite in pretty easily. It's a self-drilling, self-tapping screw, and there's already a pilot hole for it, but the pilot hole should be a little undersized so that it goes in tight. Okay, I've got 2 screws in that one, and that may be all I put in for now on this one. So I got 2 pieces that are sitting there together. One of the things you should know is on the bottom piece, in the bottom part of number 2, there's a tab on the back. I'm going to go to piece number 3 and I'll show you that tab. This is piece number 3. It's going to be the next chunk that we put in, and it has this 3/8 inch tab on the back with the perforations there. Some of those that we may have you bend down 90 degrees on the bench, and others will leave sticking out like this. The ones that stick out, they go back in underneath there and they sit on top of a casting boss that's part of the block. If you feel underneath there, you'll feel that boss is what I call it. It's like a bar that's cast into the block, goes all the way across underneath the manifold, and so these pieces will sit right on top of that, and the ones we bent down will butt up against it. So between the 2 of them, they locate it there so that it can't go up or down, and it can't go in any farther. So anyway, this is piece number 3. I'm going to put it in as it is. I maybe should have had that tab bent down on that one, but we'll worry about that later. Now I'm sliding it in from the right, and I want it to come past the other and then back inside, so that once again the dust can slide across the top of this and just keep going to my left, or to my right, I mean. Okay, one there, and there are holes on the bottom. The tabs overlap on the bottom, and you can, for most of these, you should be able to reach underneath with the stubby screwdriver and find the holes that line up through those tabs, so that we have screws on the outside and screws on the bottom that pull them together. It doesn't maybe take all that many screws to hold this together on there, but I would rather err on the side of having lots of fastening points rather than not enough. Now you can maybe see while I'm screwing this in there, the place where we turn those manifold clamps. We're run down through that space with piece number 3 here, and clearly we've got just enough clearance for it to fit down through there, and looks like it'll work. Okay, so we got piece number 3 in place. The next piece I'm going to show you the installation of is actually piece number 6. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 in place, or excuse me, 1, 2, and 3 in place. Piece 4 and 5 are going to be the divider that separates the compressor here from the exhaust turbine here, and I think it'll be easier to put them in after we get 6 in. I could be wrong, and I'll find that out if I am, but this is piece number 6. I bent this back 3/8 inch flange. I bent it down, looking at the piece like from this end. I don't know if you can see that, but I bent this flange down so so that it will butt up against that boss on the block. The other two pieces have that flange flat. We'd probably alternate them, and I should do that during the folding video. Hopefully we'll get that right so that you fold it and then they'll be correct. But this one I bent down so it'll butt up against that to keep it from sliding too far back in. I ran screws through these holes here so that they're threaded, so that they hopefully go together a little easier, because these are hard to reach. This is probably one of the pieces that might make you well, I'll have to go to confession or something, because it can be kind of frustrating to get this in here. It'll go right up underneath the exhaust turbine. Again, with this little flange here on the back bent down, it's going to go in place like this, but down underneath the manifold. And so you go underneath the exhaust turbine and find the magic spot where this thing will fit up in there. I had it in there earlier, so I know it will go. There, it's up in place. Now this will go behind. If you're looking down here, I hope you can see it. I don't guarantee that, but you're looking down between the exhaust turbine and the compressor turbine. There's about 2 inches in there, and there's a pressure line, a steel oil line that comes up from below, goes over the top, and serves the turbocharger bearing here. This piece goes back behind that. It'll fit behind that, and there's actually a cutout in the corner, bottom corner of it, that should fit right around that oil line. And there were some little flower petal fingers cut, so that if you need to bend that open there a little bit more to fit around that oil line, you can do that. I always recommend that you bend those tips so that they're parallel to the oil line rather than pointed at it, because we don't want them to touch it and then vibrate against it and potentially vibrate and cut through that oil line. They shouldn't cut through it, because this is relatively soft steel, and so is the oil line, and it's thicker, but the laser cut this tin out, and so the edge of it is kind of sharp and abrasive. And so you probably want to make sure that if you need to, you can bend those little flower petals that go around that oil line so that they run parallel to the line, if that makes sense. Now I can see a hole down here that it lines up, and I want to put a screw through from the bottom up in here if I can reach it. Interestingly, it can take you 15 minutes to put this piece in place. If you let go of it, it will immediately fall out of the bottom thing and go to the bottom of the hole under the engine. I don't know how that works, but that's what happens. So I've let it go for right now, and I'm going to try and reach under and put a screw in. I'm using the little stubby screwdriver here again. And we'll see whether it's possible to reach this. There, I got that screw started. There is a second one about 1.25 inches behind it, and I can see that one down here from a more oblique angle looking back in there, and I don't know if I can reach it to do it, but you should be able to. I am reaching in from the left side behind the compressor turbine underneath there with my hand and that little stubby screwdriver, and so now I've got one screw in there. There's a second one. If I could get that one, I would. I'm going to not do that for the sake of brevity here in this video, but I got one in there, and that links that piece to the previous one. Now I'm going to come back with try piece number 4, and it will slide in from the bottom, kind of rotate. It'll come up around between the oil line, and should come right up kind of against the bottom of the turbocharger bearing. And I may just let it sit in there for now. It's kind of stuck in there, and then I'm going to come in with piece number, the next one, piece number 5. Piece number 5 is going to fit over the top of the turbocharger bearing, and it's going to run into this wastegate actuator piston here. In order to be able to fit around that, I have to take the pressure line, the rubber line, it's blue in this case, off. Use a clamp, pliers to move that clamp back, and then you can slide this off. For now, you don't forget to put it back on. And then we'll see whether this piece will go in here. And there it goes. Oh man, look at that. Slid right down in there. And now the question is how many screws can we put through and which direction do they go through? If you look at the pieces, they have the pilot holes. The outer pilot hole where the screw goes through first is the larger one, then it'll bite into the smaller pilot hole. So you can tell by the size of the holes which piece should be on the outside and which way the screw goes in. At least I can tell that. And try one with the screw gun here just to save some time. Yeah, there went the bottom piece. And drop that one out. And of course, this one was easy to reach. It's sitting on the transmission between my knees. That was piece number 4. So I got one screw in here, and there are a couple screw holes down farther right in where my fingers are here. We may be able to get a screw in there with the long driver bit. I neglected to bring one of those along today. You'll get one with your kit that's about somewhere between 10 inches and a foot long, and you can kind of reach back behind stuff here and put in a screw with that. You may also be able to reach, if the screw holes call for that, underneath behind the exhaust turbine here and get one crossways under there. Okay, I pulled that up from underneath, and there I put 3 screw holes where they overlap right in front of my, see if I can tilt you down so you can see that. I'll move you around here. If we look from this end, get that out of the way. If you look from this end, this is piece 4 coming up from the bottom and 5 over the top here, and I've got 3 holes in here that line up so that you could put screws in there. Now you probably can't use all 3 of those, because right behind that is the casting of the compressor, but that compressor housing has gaps, or I don't know, recesses in it, and so we want at least one of these to be able to have a screw go through and land in one of those recesses to be able to hold it together. Otherwise it'll push up against that and push this piece away from that compressor housing, and we want it to be flat up against that. So whichever screw, it may be this one, maybe that one, and this one I can use. It looks to me right now like this top one won't work, but I'm going to try the others and see if I can get a screw in these. Let's see if I can stick you on over here to watch. I need a longer driver bit. I've got a 6-inch one here. I'll give you a 10-inch or 12-inch one, a 6-inch one, a stubby one, a regular little one for the driver, and whichever one works. Well, that didn't clear. Rats. The 6-inch ones, the ones I give you anyway, I think are magnetized. That's helpful. We're going to try something else. I'm going to stick a screw in here, but that one right now goes on the outside of the housing, and it distorts where the piece wants to land. but it does keep things lined up the way they're supposed to be. I'm going to shoot a screw through. Since they are self-drilling, self-tapping, I'm going to try that. There, that one seemed to hit a gap in the compressor housing. When you're designing the tin, there's just no way to know whether there's going to be a space for that screw behind there, so there's no way to know where to put the screw holes. There. Well, I may change the design between making this fitting so that I put several more holes through here, so that hopefully you can shoot one through somewhere that will catch both of these pieces and pin it into to a recess in this housing. I'll try and mark that on this so I know where to put it when I do that. But I've got one shot through here that will seem to hold this together for right now. You can also, if you need to, shoot screws through, because they will drill themselves through and thread themselves in place. It's just not as nice as having the pilot holes done ahead of time. Okay, so that's those two. I would probably also try to look for the screws in the back side where these two overlap, and see if I couldn't now tie them together. Again, I need a long driver for that. I don't have it here right now. I need a 10-inch one or something like that. But that's what I would, whether it's from my left to right, or whether it's to reach back behind and go from right to left, if you can do that and get through there and get a screw that links these together. Frankly, the whole thing gets kind of wedged in place here where it really can't go anywhere anyway. It's now wrapped around the turbocharger bearing, and when we put more pieces on, it'll tie it together even more. But still, I like to put as many screws on there as you can to hold it together. Okay. Next one I may try to do is piece number 7. It will slide. Well, we'll see what it'll do. I'm going to sit down and go sit on the transmission and look underneath here to do this one. Well, that was easy. Okay, well, we can learn something from that. If you're looking at this piece, this goes underneath the exhaust turbine, and this is a cutout for that pressure oil line. There's the other piece before that had a corner for this as well, with these little flower petals. And if you need to, take a pliers, a needle nose pliers, whatever, and bend these like 90 degrees so that they parallel that oil line. Now, if there's good clearance around the oil line when you get it installed, that's probably not necessary. But even so, if they're bent 90 so that the flat face goes against that oil line, if it ever touches it, it won't hurt it. Whereas this edge touches it, I don't like that. This hole in this one, this bigger one, with the flower petals, is to go around the return from that bearing. That's a larger line, and in this case I need to bend some of these in order for it to even clear at all. Again, the lines, it's hard to know exactly where those lines are going to be on any given combine. I think in assembly they probably have some tolerance that allows them to move a little bit. So I've bent those down a little bit, the ones on the back side here, because that's where it wants to interfere right now, and I'm going to try and fit it again. This one goes, it's a little tight in there. And the way the holes are cut, the pilot holes in this one, this piece should fit underneath these ones that we just put in between the compressor and the exhaust turbine. So it should kind of wrap around the bottom side of that assembly. customers appears to be willing to do that. There went my pliers to the bottom of the hole. So you should be looking at me or at the exhaust turbine here now. I'm going to try and put some screws from underneath this tray up through the flange on this and hook it together. The fit around the oil line is actually pretty good so far. There, that went in nice. Okay, I got two of them in. Once you get two in a row, then it'll kind of pull everything in alignment, so the rest of them should go. I can feel one, two, at least two more on the back slope of that thing where it goes up behind there. Those are going to probably have to be reached with a small stubby screwdriver, but you can reach underneath and get at them without a lot of difficulty. Again, for now it's pulled in place, and I'll probably keep going. Okay, I'm going to show you piece number 9. Piece number 9 is going to go in behind this thing up under the manifold, slide to the left, and slide underneath the previous pieces under the manifold that we've put in place. It also has to fit around the actuator that comes up from this control box up to what I call a choke. So it's got an arm that rotates, and it's got a link, that kind of a bone-shaped link that goes up there and swings this choke, and it goes up through here. And so you'll have to get it past that to fit around that link. When I got it in there, and you can get it in there, I also trimmed off a little bit of this tab up here so that it doesn't bump into the one that we bent down on the previous one. So when we slide this underneath there, doesn't cause interference. At least it shouldn't. I might even cut off some more of that. Probably go an inch here, because I think we overlap an inch, so we don't want to hit that other piece that's bent down with this one. Anyway, so we can take off an inch or so of this tab. When we do get it in there, you're not going to be able to reach under to get screws in here. I don't think there's any space left when we get that. There's just nothing under there to reach space to get your hand in there or a tool in there. But you can get this one from the outside, from this side, not from behind. And so we can slide that in, and I actually could look down there and see when the hole lined up, and then with a 6-inch driver, I'd probably use a 10 or 12-inch one, preferably if I had one here, to reach down and shoot a screw through. It'll actually catch, I think, 3 pieces. This previous one that's here, and one that it overlaps, and then this one is in the back, and it'll go through and bite that and pull that together. It's not clear at all. We might be able to go underneath this exhaust pipe, leaving the turbo here as well with a long driver bit, and we might be able to go through a couple things and catch these and get a screw, 1 or 2 screws in there. And if you can, by all means do, because we're probably not going to be able to reach these underneath there. This one I could get in. I put it in there and I got it in there, and I've taken the piece back out. I had to trim a little bit here to make it fit around that actuator. I'll try and fix that on the pieces that you would get in your kit. So then you have to figure out how to get this behind here, slide it across right to left, work it around this actuator arm and get it in place, and then it goes behind or underneath these previous pieces, so that you can get a screw from the front down here. And this is designed to go from the front that way and that way. These were designed to go up from the bottom, but we're not going to be able to reach them, I don't think. So I'll try and get that put in place. Alright, let's see if we can get this. I'm going to try putting it down from the top in here. We'll see whether that works or not. Yeah, I got it in there all right that way, and now we're sliding it right to left. But it's got to go over the top. There's an oil line here that's got a braided crimp fitting and braided line and all that. It's got to slide on top of that, above it here. I'll let you look down from on top here. I hope you can see that. Well, I go down below to slide it in place. I think I got it there. Yeah, that's in the right spot. Now I'm sorry I'm in your way, but I got to look through here to shoot that screw in. You have to position the piece so you can see that pilot hole or the place where that screw's got to go. Okay, that may have looked easy, but a little awkward, but I got that first screw in. When I look through underneath the exhaust turbine here, I can see my finger up in there? There's a hole there and a hole there. This is going to be at a bit of an angle, but you might be able, with the long driver, be able to hit that screw hole there and get a screw through there and tie these together with a second screw. Do that if you can. The next piece I'm going to work with is I think number 8. That one will slide in from below the exhaust pipe where it leaves the turbocharger. Bring you down here and look at it. This piece, 8, slides in here, and that one we can get with quite a few screws, and it will tie some of the previous stuff together as well. So that piece fits really pretty nice right now. We will put screws in from the bottom up under this tray and into the piece that we just slid in there, and then there are some holes that will tie it to the piece that we just put in the back too, I think. I'm looking down here and I can see a screw hole here. I'm going to shoot a screw vertically down through that one probably, even if I'm not even sure whether it's supposed to be from the bottom up, but I think we can reach it from the top down easily. And then we'll get as many of in here as we can. Also, you might be able to hit one down in there. I can show you if I can get my finger underneath there. Right where my fingertip is there's a hole that lines up. It would be at an angle, but you could shoot from almost vertically here down in there and hit that hole and probably pull it together. So that one, and then there's like 3 underneath here that we can hit that will tie this one on. I'll put a couple in and then go on to the next piece. Okay, I've got the next piece here. Actually, it's a part of the next piece. The original trunk looked like this. And if you could get it in there, I think it would fit very nicely around everything it's supposed to fit around, at least I believe so. However, there's absolutely no way to get it in there at that size. It just won't slide down in here in place, and there's just too much stuff in the way. So I cut it in two, and your kit would probably now include two pieces. I'll make a neat cut here in the part and put tabs so that it overlaps, so that you can put it together when you get it here as two pieces. Then if this is the first piece, and I did have to notch this out here again to fit around that actuator arm that we talked about earlier. This piece will slide down in here. I can reach behind and take it. It'll go back in, and I bent this part of this 3/8 inch tab here. I bent it down so it'll butt up against that casting boss, and it's now will slip over the top of the previous one like that. And then I can get a screw. I'll reach under and hold the part if I can. Maybe I'll do this left-handed. Hold the part in place so I can see the hole right behind that actuator arm down there. There, I got that screw in. And even though the pilot hole is reversed, it's wrong. I put one through the top up here as well. That'll hold that for now. There are two holes here, and if you could get your stubby screwdriver in there, you could get at least one screw in one of those or both of them. You'd have to be really tight there. I'm not sure my stubby is short enough to do that. It doesn't really look like it. You might be able to get that top one in there. Just have to kind of push it at an angle. Anyway, that will hold that for now, and then we'll tie it together with other pieces. The next one, right now I don't have any tabs for that because I cut this thing in half. This one will slide down in here. Alright, this is the right hand part of that piece we cut off. I ended up trimming here some because it was a little bit long and it runs into a support bracket for the exhaust pipe. I will, in the production pieces, have tabs here, here, and here that will lay over the previous piece, and you can screw it down. These here will screw from above, right about here, if you can see where my finger is, and down through this angle here, like that, at an angle. And then there will be a tab here, but we'll make it so the screws can come up from the bottom, because by the time we get over there, there's plenty of room underneath to reach up and put screws from the bottom. So that'll tie this piece to the previous piece. I don't have any tabs here because I just mowed this piece in two now. And this T here cut fits around. There's an oil line there on the right hand end, and there's an electric block heater line, I think, that comes down there. They both will slide into this slot. You may want to make sure you tape or whatever protect that block heater line so that it doesn't get abraded by this edge and eventually cut through it. It'll short out then when they plug it in and blow a circuit breaker or whatever. But we can slide that piece in place now, hopefully. And it will wrap around that oil line and come up right parallel with the piece we cut it off from, and it'll sit in there. I don't have any way of connecting it right now. When we tie it to the end piece, maybe we'll get it hooked on there. Once we have these tabs into production pieces, you'll be able to screw it on there, and so then we have pieces that go all the way across here under the manifold and then down under the exhaust pipe here. So that right now it's kind of an orphan piece a little bit there, but it'll have tabs to hook it on before. You can see where that block heater line goes through there, and that oil line there. This probably should raise up a little bit and go right back in against the block like that. So that oil line should come almost back into that T slot in there. So it's about like that. Now it may have a little flex in there when you get these first in place, and then when we put more pieces on here, we'll tie it together and kind of make it rigid. Let's look at this piece. This is the chunk that goes underneath. It's like, I call it a tray, but it's shaped kind of like a tray. It goes underneath this choke that's got a heat shield thing around it, and the exhaust pipe elbow here. It'll slide in around underneath there. There are 2 screws right here, and these are your key ones to line up. They screw in from underneath and join the previous piece to that. I had to trim a bunch on here to make it fit. It fits pretty good right now. I will make the production pieces the same shape as what I've trimmed here, so that hopefully it'll fit. Also had to trim some on this end. I was too long out this way, and I had to cut back here a little bit to make it fit around that support bracket. And I'm cut too deep here again. I'll tighten those up in the production pieces so that it fits, but doesn't fit with a lot of gap like that. This piece slides in from the grain tank side underneath here, and then you line up those screw holes and put those 2 in, and that should line it up pretty much. It'll still have a little bit of give on the other end, but you should be able to position it that way, and then we'll tie it together with the end piece that wraps underneath it here. That's the next piece we're going to work on. I want to look back in here. You see these 2 tabs on the top of that end piece? They lay over 90 degrees here, and the top deck on the whole enclosure is going to sit in part on those 2 tabs. But I have those tabs pre-bent at 90 degrees here, but that really made it harder to fit that piece in. So you could leave those, bend them back up. They don't have to be completely flat, you know, or up parallel to this face, but you could bend them up quite a bit, and it might help when you're trying to shove that piece up in there. There's enough room here that once these are up in place, it's not hard to grab them with a tool or your fingers or whatever and bend them back down 90 degrees so to get them lined up where they need to be. But that might make it easier to shove that piece up in place. That's so hard to, otherwise it's so hard to get this up here.
I'm going to stick this little bit of video in here with regard to the CAD model, because I seem to be short some video segments from the installation that we did on the combine. The end piece, the right hand end, is shown in light blue here. When I did the installation on the combine, that piece is very difficult to put in place. There's a whole bunch of framing and brackets and junk right off to the right hand side here, so there's only a space of probably about, I don't know, a half an inch or so between the exhaust pipe here and some of the other stuff and that bracket, those brackets and stuff off to the right. I did manage to get that put in there, and on that one I had fingers cut in the top of this like you see on the far side here, so that you could cut or bend those to fit up against the diesel oxidation catalyst. And I bent them inward because bending them outward they'd run into the brackets, and there was a little more room to bend them in underneath that circular can. Since fitting that on there, I thought it might be easier to break that into 2 pieces, and so this current tin design has a kind of a nested piece here. It's got this lower chunk that you see in light blue as well here, and it has, excuse me, I'm trying to get it where you can see it, flanges underneath that wrap underneath the bottom tray around here and up back here, and you can put screws in underneath there to hold it in place. It has these flanges on top here and here and here. Those I point out in the video of the assembly that you may want to bend them partway back up, or not bend them completely over, because it'll be easier to slide this piece up from underneath and get it in place with those kind of pointing vertically rather than over flat. Once you get it in place, you can bend them down or over so that they support the top deck here, or the pieces that have to mate to them. Instead of cutting fingers in the top of this piece, I cut a chunk off here and then made a second piece here that fits just inside of it, and it has the curve that should fit up against the diesel exhaust catalyst can. Should be about the same radius, so it should fit pretty close there. However, I don't know how far up or down it'll slide in order to do that, and so if you can see as I hold the cursor here the pilot holes that are shown in the background through that piece. And what you do is you'd put the lower piece in place first, here, this one in place first, and get it screwed to the bottom and around it so it's attached a little bit, and then and we might even come around and do these other pieces here and get these in place, this one anyway first, and then at some point, I'm just not sure with regard to how getting everything positioned tightly, then this piece up on top you can slide in there, get it fit in there, and slide it up against the diesel exhaust catalyst can until it fits tight, and then you reach in from the far side of where we're looking right now, the opposite from over on this side. Let's get this position so you can see it well. This gray piece would probably have to not be there at this point. We'd have to do this before we installed that piece, because otherwise I don't think you'll be able to reach. But if I look over the top of here, you can look down inside and see the pilot holes in this piece. That one would slide up from the inside around our exhaust pipe, which is not shown here but is in the way here. You have to get around behind it, slide up against the can, which is also not shown here, and then reach through with a long screwdriver and shoot a screw through these pilot holes and through the piece behind that piece there that's highlighted now. I didn't put both sets of pilot holes in there because I can't tell exactly how far you have to slide this up to make it tight against the diesel exhaust catalyst can. But once it's up tight there, you could reach through and hit these screw holes. There's two there and there's two on this side, and shoot through the outer piece of tin and bite and screw it on so that it'll hold in place. It's a little bit tough to do that, but it's a lot easier than trying to squish those fingers bent over up through this space against the diesel exhaust catalyst can. I think this will be an easier way to assemble that. The only question I have is if this assembly on this end and stuff is sagging at all, because it's not all tied together with everything else. When you put that piece in place, if you slide it up tight against the can and then screw it on here, it's going to keep that piece in that sagged position all the time. So we want to kind of make sure we've got everything else this end piece as well attached as possible to the bottom under here as possible, so that it's lifted up where it needs to be so that when you slide this top piece up in place, it mates to that can and everything is right. Then we can go on with the rest of the pieces and assemble them around this one in place and this one in place and stuff like that to finish that. So that doesn't show up very well in that assembly video, but this should help with that.
Alright, once we have that end piece on, this outside end or the far end, next piece I'm going to do is piece number 13. It has a flange on the left side and a flange without any holes in it that fits up against the diesel oxidation catalyst on the top, and it simply slides up like this. This flange should go right over this little flange here and fit like that, and you can put screws in along the bottom here and then up this side Do the bottom and the side, don't do anything else but right now, but that is that whole piece, I guess. They should line up, and that'll tie that piece together with the end piece. That's one of the easier pieces to put on, so I won't show you how to do it. I'll just take you offline and I'll put a couple screws in. Alright, I put that piece up in place here. I've got several screws. It sags a little bit right now because there's nothing holding it all up there, but you can push it up and see that it fits up against the diesel oxidation catalyst with that flange up there. Eventually we'll probably get it held up in there when we get all this other stuff connected. The next piece, number 15, look for the number 15 in the flange of yours. This one is going to go on here, right here. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 screw holes in the bottom edge that line up easily with the screw holes in the bottom or in the edge of the flange of the tray. And then there'll be one screw right there that will tie it to this piece, and then we'll have to add on other stuff after that. And there's a sensor line that comes through this big hole that we left for it here. We'll fill in around that. I think I have a trim piece that will go in there and cover or fit close around that, but you can also fill in there with some of the foil tape if you need to. But this one fits just where I've got it here. It's easy to put on. I'll take you offline while I put some screws in it. I'm looking at piece number 14. It fits underneath the diesel exhaust catalyst. Has a little wedge-shaped tail that comes down here. I actually took this piece 15 back off temporarily. I only had a couple screws in it, but it might be better to put 14 on before 15, and probably the order is what I should have thought about to begin with. Anyway, you can put this one on, the 14, with a screw up here against this outside piece, and another screw down here, and a third one in there. Might even be a fourth one in here you can get. You have to bend the tabs under the diesel exhaust catalyst can out towards us here to make it clear, and I've got them bent a little too far. When I get done here, I would probably push them back up so that they're as tight as I can get them against the can. I don't want it to leak a lot of air or let dust in there. I want it to ooze air out instead of leak a lot there. So I want to try and make that fit up against the can as close as possible. But you can put that one on with screws. He'll fit behind the sensor line here and behind this the flange on the edge of this one. Then you can put 15 back in place. That's going to be the outer cover of the turbocharger exhaust turbine here. I've got piece number 16. It's got a funky little knockout here in the corner that actually fits around this wastegate actuator piston thing there. So this will slip around the outside of this other part, fit around here. So we've got screw holes here, screw holes at the bottom, along the bottom and along the front edge here. It shouldn't be hard. You have to squish a little bit maybe to make things line up, but once you get one screw in or a couple screws in, then everything will start to pull into alignment, and you put the rest of those screws on. Don't put them all on the upper left-hand corner here yet. We're going to have probably a piece that wraps around here. So, but you can put screws down this side, across the bottom, and part way up here. The bottom two on the left side, perhaps. Okay, I'll put that on and we'll give it a look. I'm looking at piece number 19 right now. I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to put it on now or... Anyway, I did. It goes on this corner around this wastegate actuator piston. And I had to... You have all these little cuts in here, so you got fingers, because that way you can bend those out to fit around the portion of this can that wants to stick out of this box. And so I bent those out. I bent this tab here up, and I cut a little bit off there by that hole. You might need to trim a little bit on yours too. I don't know if I'll be able to make this change the design so that it fits perfectly. The rest of it actually fits pretty good. You just have to bend these fingers out, and you can bend them out a little bit more and then push them back in if you want once you get it on there. But this piece had to bend up with the pliers, and I cut a chunk out of this corner to make it clear this little bit here. in order to put it on, pull this out, slide it down in there, and it should pinch between the compressor turbine face here and this previous piece. So it'll slip in there. This little tab here actually goes over the top and she'll slip into place, and you can put screws through the top 2 or 3 holes here to hold it on. So that's piece number, whatever the number was, 19 or something like that. Goes on that corner. Once you have it in place, you can push these fingers back in a little bit if you want to make it fit up tighter against the face of this thing. Once we have that done, we can also put the tube back on here and put the clamp back on, and then I would use aluminum foil tape and tape over this corner to tighten it up so that we don't have a ragged corner there that can catch dust and allow anything in here. We got a radiator blast coming this way, and we don't want it pushing anything in there. So tighten that whole thing up with tape once you get the kit assembled. Okay, now it's time for the biggest piece. This is the top deck that goes on here. I've laid it in place. You have to just kind of snake it in from my left to right, from the radiator end to the other end. You have to work it around this sensor line that comes out of that hole. So you have to work it around there without cutting that. It pushes up, should push up against this wall of this piece here. It'll have to fit in this corner around this wastegate actuator piston. I actually pulled that corner piece off and laid it over the top because it looks like that's what was intended in the design with the screw holes here, the size of the screw holes. But anyway, then I still had to tuck that piece back in underneath this front here like this. But if you do that, if you get this all, and you have to bend these flanges here up as necessary to fit around that wastegate piston. You know, do what you need to make it clear that. It doesn't have to clear it by much. It can touch it. That doesn't hurt anything. You just don't want it wedged, jammed too tight against it. And then you need to start, look around and make sure we're lined up kind of all around here. And we are. And then you can start putting in screws here. Find one that lines up. For instance, this one lines up right here for me. And I think I could get one down here at this end. You get a couple of screws in and it starts to pull everything else into line. You can also start at this front edge here and do these, and kind of once you get some started, they'll pull everything else into alignment. But you might have some torquing to do on things, but it should pull all of these pieces kind of together to link them to that top piece. So I'll put a few screws in that just to make sure it's going to work okay, but I think it will. And then also, I'm sideways here, so it's hard for you to see that probably. But there are slots in this back flange, and they should line up with bolt holes that are not used that are in the head. And so those I believe they are, I don't know if they're numbered, if they're 10 millimeter or 8 millimeter. Either way, should be button head cap screws in your kit to fit in there. I think these are 10 millimeter, but you'll have to check and see. And you don't necessarily need to use every one of them, but one on this end, one in the middle, one on that end.
We were putting this top piece on when the video kind of ended. I was pointing out that you can use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts or button head cap screws to hold this top piece on against the block. Once you have that on, and you can go around and put any last screws in around here and all around the place to cement that piece permanently and lock it on there. Then you can go around with tape and put tape over any places where we've got gaps underneath, or don't forget underneath here, if there's places where we weren't able to get screws in, you can always stick a piece of tape under there if you can reach in and get at it. Stick it on there, and then any place where we have a gap around something that's entering or leaving, like the oil lines here, if there's any gap, a substantial gap around those things, you want to try and get some of that tape underneath there and tighten up the space around there. It also helps to immobilize those things in there so that they don't rattle around together. Similarly, there's this opening in here where the that little actuator arm from the choke control under here fits, and if you can tighten that up around that with tape, you don't want to really interfere with it at all, but you could slide the tape right up close to it so that we don't leak a lot of air around that those penetrations of the system. This also is a piece that didn't show up in my on the combine installation video. It's a flexible piece. It's got a flanges here to bend so that it'll fit up against this side. But there are not holes drilled in the piece underlying it. I've got pilot holes in the outer gray piece here, but not in the gold or the gray piece behind. This will fit around that sensor that penetrates the exhaust, which has a much bigger hole here, so that we make it possible to make sure we catch that piece coming through without any bother to it. Once you have that coming through there, now you can slide this piece around that sensor and slide it in place here, so that we make the opening around it much smaller. It'll also, you notice it's got those fingers here, so you can take a needle nose pliers, bend some of those fingers out if necessary to parallel that line, so that we don't bother it or abrade it or cut it with these sharp laser cut edges of the tin. Once you slide that up in place, then you can just shoot screws through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as many screws as necessary here through this to hold that piece on in place. Probably doesn't take 5 to hold that little piece there, but you can use the holes that are available. I think that's the last of the tin itself. I'll also point out here that piece on the corner, this dark blue one, fits underneath this light blue piece here on the outside, but it's shown, the way it's shown here, this way this twinkles means that it's the same thickness, it's occupying the same space as the top deck. And so I think that you could probably, it looks to me like you could, well, whichever one has the larger hole probably is supposed to be the one on top. But it could be that this blue one goes underneath the top, or it could be that it overlaps the top. Either one will probably work. But if you look at the holes, if there's one that has larger holes, that one should be the one on top, because the screw will go through that large hole first. So that's all of the tin pieces in the assembly. You'll note that there's a hole, 4-inch hole here. That's where our clean air is going to be pumped in. It's right on top of the turbocharger, and I will have a separate, very short video about how to route the tubing to get air to that location. But you'll essentially have a little HVAC takeoff in here, just a short stub that with fingers that goes inside there to attach that, and you'll want to tape that on too. And then there'll be a HVAC Flex 90 that you can twist the individual pieces of to adjust how high and what angle that air comes up out of here at, and then you go on to a 90-degree rubber fitting, which will connect onto the aluminum tubing that will shoot over the top of the valve cover up above. So that's the tin set for the 7250 model 2022 year. It may fit earlier models than that as well, or earlier years that, but the one I was working on was a 2022 year machine. Again, be careful. Even though this kit is extraordinarily good at keeping you from starting igniting dust at the exhaust system, I can't guarantee that you'd never have a fire or smolder on the combine, because there are many other potential sources of ignition. This is just the most chronic one. So that's the tin set for the 7250. Good luck with your installation. If you have other questions about the orientation of parts, that CAD video does a longer job of explaining the same things I've done here, and along with the rest of the pieces. Good luck.